Hi, everyone. As folks start to join us today and get entered in through the webinar, I just want to thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, What are the Benefits of Shoreline Restoration? My name is Kelly from Wisconsin Land and Water, a 501(c)(3) that supports the efforts of land conservation departments and committees throughout the state in a variety of ways, including helping to host trainings and events like this one. Before we begin, I just wanted to mention that this webinar is going to be recorded and we will post it to the Wisconsin Land and Water website for future viewing. I'll follow up with everyone who is registered today with an email that includes a link to the webinar. We'll take questions today throughout both the chat function and the Q&A function. So feel free to submit a question at any time during the webinar, and we'll reserve special time at the end after both presenters to answer any questions that come through. Our presenters today are Katie Reed, Watershed Science Coordinator with Fox-Wolf Watershed Alliance, and Keir Peckham, owner of Natural Landscapes and Superintendent of Landscaping with CW Pupero. But before our presenters begin today, I'm going to first kick things over to Megan, who has some quick information to share about Wisconsin Stormwater Week.
Great, thank you. That's shared. All right, so for those of you who are maybe unfamiliar, Wisconsin Stormwater Week has been going on for 3 years now. This is our third year doing it. And it's a group of people from across the state. It's a grassroots effort to spread awareness and about pollution prevention. And so throughout this week, we are doing a variety of things, and we're also encouraging everyone in Wisconsin to participate in some way. We also have an official Wisconsin Stormwater Week proclamation. So we had Tony Evers sign this. He has supported Wisconsin Stormwater Week as an official week in Wisconsin, recognized as an official Wisconsin Stormwater Week. We also have a partner sign up and outreach toolkit for the partners who get involved. Where essentially these partners are getting involved in a way to help promote Wisconsin Stormwater Week, host their own events during Wisconsin Stormwater Week, get the message out. And then we have this outreach toolkit that includes a social media kit, a press release, and then some other resources as I've included on this page. But as part of the third Wisconsin Stormwater Week, we have a statewide call to action where we're encouraging people in Wisconsin to host a cleanup or get involved with a cleanup or the neighborhood adopt a storm drain program that's in their area. And then we also have 4 hosted webinars this year. Today, it's about shoreline restoration. And we are lucky to have Wisconsin Land and Water to host these events. But in addition to these webinars, we plan to have this is a strategic plan to have Wisconsin Stormwater Week the same week as National Stormwater Awareness Week and National Estuaries Week. So there are links in the chat that include National Stormwater Awareness Week information, and you can access the trainings there. Some of them are geared more towards stormwater professionals, but they seem like really neat opportunities to learn more, specifically for professional development. And then National Estuaries Week is also happening. So if you're unfamiliar with estuaries, maybe check out the link that's added in the chat, and you can see if there's one near you and you can get involved. This is what I was mentioning earlier. We have a call to action for Wisconsin residents to get involved. Litter is one of the contributing factors to pollution in our waterways. So a simple act of picking up trash in your neighborhood can help protect local streams and waterways. And it's a great community building event. We also added, if you have any storm drain, adopt a storm drain programming. get involved there as well. And then I added a link in the chat for folks to register their events on our website, so that if there's folks that are looking to get involved with a local event, they can see that posted on our website and contact you or whoever it is that's organizing the event. So just so we're all familiar with stormwater, before we jump in, stormwater is rain or snow melt. It's running off our lawns, our streets, and it can pick up different types of pollutants, and then it carries those pollutants to the storm drains, and these storm drains connect our streets to our streams. So whatever the stormwater can pick up and bring with it through those storm drains can end up in our favorite rivers, lakes, and coastal waters. Why is that important? Why is pollution prevention, stormwater pollution prevention important? Well, those places, those rivers and lakes, are places we love to recreate in, but it's also habitat for wildlife and perhaps also our drinking water sources. So there's so many reasons that this is important to talk about and to prevent these types of pollutants from entering our waterways. So you're learning from Wisconsin Stormwater Week experts during these webinars. We could all use some tips and tricks to reduce stormwater pollution. So by joining these webinars, specifically this one, you're going to learn about shoreline restoration, which is a really cool practice to help reduce and increase water quality around our waterways. So I hope you enjoy, and I'll pass it off to Katie.
Thank you very much. Uh, let's see here. All right, how's that looking? Is that the title slide there?
Looks good.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Katie Reed. I'm the Watershed Science Coordinator at Fox-Wolf Watershed Alliance. And today I'll be talking to you about a foxwolf and our shoreline restoration program, but also just a bit about the issues our shorelines are facing and the benefits of restoration. And some tips and tricks and resources to implement shoreline restoration practices. And quite a few of the kind of projects I'll talk about today can also be applied to non-shoreline properties as well. So Fox Wolf, we're a nonprofit based out of Appleton, working to protect and restore the water resources of the Fox-Wolf River Basin. So on that map there, you can see the basin is quite large. We are the largest drainage basin to Lake Michigan and the third largest overall to the Great Lakes. So in addition to our shoreline restoration programs, we also do water quality monitoring. We work with farmers and agriculture. We work with local municipalities, with stormwater practices. We even do trash cleanups, like you might have heard from Jessica Schultz yesterday, and a lot more. So if you're interested in learning more about us, please feel free to check us out. But we do know that our waters in the Fox-Wolf Basin, but also similar problems throughout the state, our waters are impaired in terms of, in our case, excess phosphorus and sediments loading coming off the land and into our waters. So phosphorus, natural elements, in lots of different forms, things needed to survive. But when we kind of add a lot more coming off our land, it can fuel harmful algal blooms. So these are algae species that are naturally occurring, but when we give them extra food, they grow even more, so they can really take off. We also face problems with excess sediments. So sediment is that soil and dirt, again, coming off the land into the water. That bottom right photo there is kind of the Bay of Green Bay. It gives it that kind of chocolate milk appearance when there's extra sediment coming off from stormwater runoff. And that can cause problems because it clouds up the water, so the sun doesn't penetrate as deep in the water. So aquatic plants that might be able to compete with algae for extra nutrients don't grow as deep. So it can cause problems that way. And a lot of that comes from erosion. So the water is a kind of a force, and it can really carve out dirt and soil. and just take that right to our waterways. Um, so today we're specifically talking about shorelines, so that interface of land and water, which for our purposes, our programs, as well as for a lot of shoreline programs throughout Wisconsin, is not only that exact spot where the land meets the water, but also a little bit inland too. Uh, for our program, the definition is 1,000 feet of a lake or 300 feet of a river or stream. Then that's because that can kind of create a buffer zone, so a lot goes on in that area. And not only in that buffer zone, but throughout the watershed, what happens on our land is then reflected in the quality of our surface waters. So that exact interface where water meets the shore is very important, but also a little bit inland too, because as we know, that runoff can travel overland and pick up phosphorus sediment soil. So there's lots of different ways shorelines can look. I think the left and the middle picture are kind of typical shorelines around here. We've got pretty flat lawn up to maybe some rocks and a little bit of plants. Uh, that is quite familiar for Lake Winnebago, if anybody's familiar with this area, on the west side. The east side, or anywhere that's affected by the Niagara Escarpment, that kind of geological feature left over by some glaciers, they can have really steep banks, so that can cause some extra slope problems for runoff, because runoff can really pick up speed and again force. And some of our shorelines look like the far right over there, having a good combination of rocks, plants, even some old trees, tree limbs, and growing trees. So we love our shorelines. We love to work, live, and play around them, and so do a lot of other creatures. It's really great habitat for things like herons, frogs, turtles, and more. So they're not only great to look at, but they're also very important for the ecosystem. But why are they facing these issues? Well, a lot of shorelines way back had a lot of natural features, rocks, plants, flowers, sedges, grasses, trees even. But like I said, we love to work, live, and play around them. So as we kind of develop that area, we might be adding more impervious surfaces. So impervious surfaces are those that don't allow stormwater runoff to soak into the ground. Um, Concrete, house roofs, even turf grass in some instances can really act like a harder surface. So as water moves over them, it just picks up again speed, picks up more water, really can create that force that can cause erosion. So that's just a diagram of that, but some pictures in action there. We can have shorelines or stream banks that look like the left there, where we've got some houses set back, but runoff maybe coming off the land. And since there's not a whole lot to hold on to soil and sediment there, it can carve out that dirt, just leading it right into the river, lake, stream, and just adding that more water, more force, and it's kind of a compounding issue there where as you get less to hold on to that sediment, more is lost, more erosion happens, making the force even stronger, and erosion issues downstream even worse. And then on the right there, we've got kind of sometimes we have shorelines where runoff is coming right down to the water, and with nothing to interrupt it, can just go right into our lakes, rivers, and streams, and might be fueling kind of those harmful algal blooms. So it's the problems we're facing is the amount of water, the speed that it moves at because of the force, and then the quality of water, so anything it picks up as it's moving. And like I said, a lot of this is shoreline, but even if you're not on the shoreline, you might be closer than you think. As it was stated, a lot of our storm drains go right to our lakes, rivers, and streams, so they can pick up sediment, dirt, and extra nutrients from your leaves, grass clippings, etc. So some of the practices I talk about today are shoreline specific, but some of them can also be applied more inland too. So what are we talking about when we're saying shoreline restoration? These are our solutions to stabilize the shore, capture runoff, to both slow it down and allow it to kind of be filtered, and then enhancing the overall ecosystem health. So going from kind of a middle ground here where we again still love to work, live and play on the shore, but adding a bit more either engineered solutions or natural solutions or a combination kind of both. Again, just to be able to stabilize, reduce erosion, capture that runoff, and hopefully provide some other ecosystem benefits as well. At Fox-Wolf, we mainly work, our shoreline restoration program is mainly through the Healthy Lakes and Rivers program. So this is a wonderful statewide program that we, Fox-Wolf, are kind of the administrators of in this area. We work with private shoreline property owners to install smaller shoreline restoration projects. And by that, I mean they typically fall around that $1,000 cost. So they're not really, really big. But a lot of these practices can actually be scaled up to more, say, like a full stream bank restoration and things like that. Our program, again, through the Healthy Lakes and Rivers, which is administered through the DNR statewide, private property owners can actually be reimbursed for installing some of these programs. So kind of a shout out or a recruitment tip here if anybody is in the Fox-Wolf Basin and wants to learn more, please feel free to reach out and we might be able to get you enrolled in this program through us. And you can install more than one of these at a time. They work really well together a lot of the time too, kind of those benefits stack. So one of the practices that actually will not work well further inland because it happens in the water are fish sticks, or also called tree drops. So not the delicious frozen food, but these are bundles of trees that are intentionally put in the water and secured in some way, and this actually helps reduce erosion behind them on that shoreline. So we can get kind of force from wind and waves and also boat wake, and these help kind of break that up, slow that down. Plus, they have the really great side effect of providing good fish habitat, habitat for frogs, turtles, and more. For our program, these are not that popular only because we are mostly on big lakes or big rivers that have a lot of navigation. Plus, these take a little bit more pre-planning and permitting, but they are a really good option in many places. Uh, so the next practices I'll talk about are applicable to non-shoreline areas too, but they work really well on that shore. So the first is called a rock infiltration practice. This is a kind of excavated area filled with rocks of a certain size. These are often put close to structures like houses, garages, especially if they don't have gutters, because you'll get runoff coming off of the roof or off of, say, a driveway, and it can be directed into this rock infiltration area. And again, it's meant to capture that runoff, slow it down, and let it kind of settle out on land so that extra soil or pollutants it's picked up doesn't go right to the lakes, rivers, and streams. Another practice is called a diversion. Like it kind of sounds, it diverts water. So that picture there is kind of a driveway that's a bit more sandy. There are options for putting these on your more concrete driveways too, but this is some sort of structure where it diverts the water from its usual path, which probably it creates furrows or ruts or picks up speed, and instead diverts it elsewhere to the side. These actually work really well in conjunction with other practices too. So I think in this picture here, the diversion was paired with a rock infiltration area. So again, just trying to provide that area where the runoff can be more filtered and soak into the ground on land. Um, you can also divert it into rain gardens, into more wooded areas. They work really well, just trying to break up that direct path. At Fox-Wolf are so the next two are much more popular, just because they do have kind of a plant component, which I think Keir will talk a bit more about. But one of which is rain gardens. So rain gardens are slightly engineered. There is some pre-planning and engineering that has to go into them, but they are again meant to capture and let runoff infiltrate. And compared to your regular lawn grass, they allow about 30% more water to soak into the ground. So these are gardens that are dug down a little bit, not usually very far, depending on what type of soil you have, 6 inches maybe, and then filled with native plants that can handle water fluctuations. So you can direct water from, say, your downspout, or if you've got a lawn where it kind of creates those kind of furrows, those streams of water in your yard, you can direct that into these rain gardens. Um, you do want to choose plants that can handle both an influx of water and also dry periods, because we do have some of those, especially in summer. Um, and I did say that there's a little bit more engineering that goes into them just because you want to be able to place them in the correct spot and allow them to infiltrate quickly. Because a couple common misconceptions about rain gardens are that they are mosquito breeding grounds, but if you select the right area and the right infiltration spot, they should drain in about 24 or 48 hours, and mosquitoes need longer than that to breed. Um, and there's also kind of a sweet spot to place rain gardens that's greater than 10 feet from a structure, just so you don't interfere with foundation issues and capture the most runoff that you can, but within about 30 feet, just so again that runoff is somewhat directed to the garden. And these can also be sized for the land that's available and the expected runoff, so it can be pretty personalized. The bottom images there are a rain garden that's only about 120 square feet, so not huge. And that first picture is them going in the first year, so just tiny 4-inch plants, and then growing. And especially when you get the species that really, really love water, they can really take off and do well. A lot of people select primarily the grasses, sedges, and wildflower for these, but you can also put in trees too, depending again on your wants and goals for the project. Uh, we also do shoreline plantings, so I think these are probably our most popular option for our program. So these are gardens that are specifically put at that shoreline water interface. And for the Fox-Wolf program under Healthy Lakes and Rivers, they do have some requirements, including sizing. So the requirement is for it to be a minimum of 350 square feet and then 10 feet deep from that shore to like back up inland. And this is to be able to provide enough surface area for runoff to be both captured and then soak into the ground. Again, these are a combination of native plants. There's also a requirement for these to have not just wildflowers, but also grasses, shrubs, and trees. But I've recently learned native plants in Wisconsin, we've got beautiful sedges, trees, all sorts of stuff. So you can really make these pop. Um, and we do that 350 square feet requirement does tend to hit that $1,000 reimbursement that we use, but up right up against that, if not a little more, depending on what plants you choose and the size of them. But through our program, you can install more than one of these. So that bottom photo there, we have a very happy homeowner who installed one in 2023 and liked it so much and saw such benefits from it. They did another one the following year. Um, so these are really beneficial not only for runoff, but also just for beautifying the area and ecosystems too. Uh, and the benefit of kind of going through a program like ours or a different Healthy Lakes program is that we can help you with all the kind of the technical aspect of these things. Although they are small enough and somewhat simple enough that they can be done on your own too. But what exactly are these benefits here to our shoreline, our water quality? All of these practices are kind of trying to put something in between that runoff and the surface water. So for the diversion and the rock infiltration practice, that is some way to, again, capture that runoff. For native plantings and rain gardens, that stormwater runoff hits the garden and soaks into the ground because of the plants. And we use native plants in all of our practices because a lot of our native plants have really great side benefits for pollinators, but they also have really deep or extensive root systems. So they really can, that water can really soak deep into the ground. And again, root systems can be pretty extensive, so that's again more surface area for the water to sink in. But all of these practices, the goal is to slow down, capture runoff to reduce flooding and reduce the force of that water, resulting in that less erosion, less sediment, soil coming off the land, and then the plants themselves, if they're involved, can help filter and uptake phosphorus. So some tips for if you're trying to install shoreline restoration projects, no matter the size and no matter which one, is to define your goals. So when we work with shoreline property owners, sometimes the water quality benefit is just a side effect of installing one of these practices. Their main goal may be to stop erosion because they're losing some of their land. Maybe they are trying to direct runoff from one area to another or even just creating pollinator habitat, again, with just that side effect of benefits to water quality. Um, I also recommend starting small. So learning more, you're already taking kind of a first step here, but also just trying to grow one native plant, learning about it, learning its benefits, but also just, especially if you're not a big gardener, I was not before I got involved with shoreline restoration, how to take care of plants, what kind of maintenance they need or don't need, or even just a small garden. A lot of these more engineered practices are sized for the amount of runoff coming in, but even a couple of plants do help. Another tip is to diversify your projects. So again, using some of these practices in combination, native plants with a diversion. But also if you are using plants, your plant types, doing grasses and sedges and wildflowers and trees. And thinking about bloom time. So these pictures here, the one on the left, I've got blue flag iris and a sedge that are kind of in bloom early in the year, so like May. And then on the right is later in the year in fall, where we've got some asters and goldenrods blooming. So just so you have kind of that aspect going the whole growing season. And the biggest tip is to learn from others. You know, you don't have to do this all on your own. You can look at case studies. We've got some listed on our website at foxwolf.org. The Healthy Lakes and Rivers program does as well. Plus, your local landscapers and nurseries can definitely get you started and are a great resource too. We also host winter sow workshops, and I know these happen elsewhere in the state as well. So these are workshops where you can come and learn about shoreline restoration and native plants, and then grow native plants in milk jugs and take them home for your own projects. And then demonstration sites. So I talked a lot about our kind of showed you some pictures, but we also have some out on the landscape. This is especially helpful for property owners who are like, what does 350 square feet actually look like? So in a couple of public parks in our watershed, we installed different beds for shoreline plantings. So one is in Columbia Park, which is in Malone, Wisconsin, most commonly known for Jim and Linda's Supper Club. People know that a lot. It's near Fond du Lac. And then we also have one in Marble Park in Winneconne, and stay tuned for one in the Fox cities. But these you can come check them out. They're in public parks. We've got signage too. And then on our website, we have kind of the process we went through to install these. So how we picked the site, what they looked like before the installation and that first year, the maintenance that has to go into it, the cost breakdown, all that kind of thing. Um, And then I just want to leave you with a couple of resources. So again, Fox-Wolf, we've got great shoreline resources that also link to all the rest of these. The Healthy Lakes website has good resources. Your local county conservationists can often provide some insight. It may be called your Land and Water Department, your Conservation Department, things like that. They can either help you or direct you to other resources. If you are on a lake, lake associations might be able to help. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources has a lot online, and then again, your local landscaping and native plant nurseries. So with that, I just want to say that shoreline restoration, these are solutions put on the landscape and sometimes in the water, trying to stabilize our shore, reduce erosion, capture runoff, and enhance that ecosystem health. And that you can make choices every day that what happens on our land is reflected then in the quality of our surface waters. And thank you so much. I think we're taking questions at the end, but please feel free to reach out to me at another time too if you'd like.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. Up next is Keir talking a little bit more.
All right. That was very informative, Kelly. Thank you for that. Thanks for having me here. I've had my own company for the past 25 years, performing wetland restoration, prairie restoration, shoreline, also built some small water gardens and rain gardens and whatnot. But I guess I'm just going to kind of go over my history here, getting into this business back in 1990. That was like 900 years ago, it feels like. And that was right about the time that wetlands were really becoming beneficial. At least now we're starting to identify them as a beneficial part of our ecosystem and our landscape. And so being at in this field from the beginning has really taught me from the bottom up as to the importance of stormwater management, whether it be a shoreline or a rain garden or a retention basin or infiltration basin. They're all so incredibly important. And now, in today's day and age, they're even more important than they were 35 years ago with the extreme weather that we get and the importance of our water. So, working with these wetlands and these stormwater basins, stormwater management plans has been incredibly rewarding, and and I want to just continue to be involved with helping the landscape, bringing the landscape back to the way it was is really been my focus. Obviously, working with native vegetation is just such a wonderful, fun thing to be involved with. Native plants are, obviously acclimated to our soils and our climate, and they can adapt and disease resistance and being able to overwinter and all these things, and then management follows the installation. And with proper management, these environments only get better. And that's, to me, the most exciting part of restoration is just the longevity of these ecosystems and how easy they are to work with as long as you're performing the proper management. And what I've found through trial and error over all these years is that management is so much simpler than what it used to be. And I guess just looking at the history of the planet and how Mother Nature took care of the planet, obviously fire was a very important part of how the planet took care of itself in the Great Plains and throughout all the naturalized growing spaces. And now we don't have fire, so how can we mimic that? Also, grazing. Grazing was an amazing natural technique that the planet used to maintain our vegetation. So we don't have very many herbivores running around our neighborhoods anymore. So how do we mimic, natural grazing? So those are two of the major, my bullet points would be, and one of my new sayings is an ounce of management is worth a pound of restoration. There are overgrown buckthorn areas that you can simply start managing and eventually bring them back to the way they were. It's not going to be overnight. It's a long process, and you can do things to help accelerate it, throw native seed and native plants into those project areas, and then manage it properly. So with that, I guess I can try. Should I share this if I can? Or can someone pull up my PowerPoint? Or is it already
I
up?
wasn't able to access it here, but if
Okay.
you, yeah,
Okay.
try screen sharing.
All right. So if I share this, all right. So, well, um, I had it up before, but I may not be able to find it this easily here. So anyway, I will continue to just talk about, my point of view with shoreline restoration. And again, shoreline restoration is to me the same thing as prairie restoration and wetland restoration. I think all of these naturalized growing spaces are, managed the same way. And the goal is to establish perennial, long-lived native perennial vegetation. And once that is accomplished, simple management is all that is necessary moving forward. Native plants will outcompete undesirables. Obviously, you got to keep an eye out for invasive plants, which we have now in Wisconsin that we didn't have 30 years ago. Teasel is one of them I can remember back in the day. We would see it in Illinois. We never had it in Wisconsin, and now it's all over the place. So thankfully, it's easy to take, once you identify it, you can control it rather easily. So with all these jobs, shoreline restoration is incredibly important. Obviously, for erosion, we have boats and wakeboards and all this stuff that creates a little more wave action against our shorelines than we used to have. And our wildlife habitat has been reduced significantly over the years for so many different reasons, whether it be you're a golfer or a farmer, the landscape has been significantly changed. So every small project is a big deal because you're creating these spaces for pollinator species. And without pollinator species, we won't be here. So that's important. Obviously, stormwater management, managing our water. How do we slow it down? How do we keep it from going into near stream or lake? And that's what stormwater management is. And we have those plans for every new subdivision that's going in. And that's a good thing. And the biggest bonus on top of all those functions would be the aesthetics of it. A natural landscape can really add a lot to a landscape. It can be at a residential landscape. I am the first to have my formal landscape. I love my turf. I, like to throw the football around with the kids, but I also have some areas on my property that we don't throw the ball around at. And that is all now naturalized growing space. And it's one of my favorite aspects of my landscape on my property. Walking through my prairie to just take pictures of bumblebees and honeybees and all the different native wildflowers with all of their history and back to the Native Americans and their purposes. It has so much to offer, and with every plant you learn, you just get more and more involved and more excited about pursuing that type of a landscape. It would be great to see everybody have some sort of role with stormwater management or supporting our pollinator species. So, With that, one of the major functions of these naturalized growing spaces and wetlands, obviously, is containing water in times of heavy rain. We've been all seeing that more and more these days. The heavier rains are, contributing to pooling water, obviously, and the degradation of our lakes and the clarity of our water. So, you know, anybody that has wetlands on their property, enhance them, manage them. And the more they're enhanced and brought back to the way they are, the more they're going to function and the more water they're going to contain. And the slower they're going to release the stormwater during times of drought. And then, of course, you have the support of wildlife habitat. And then on top of that, as the final bonus, it would be the aesthetics. There's always something blooming in a native prairie from spring until fall. The warm season grasses are low growing all the way to the midsummer. And then you have the fireworks around, the mid-July, and then you have the grand finale in the fall with the asters and the goldenrods, like Kelly was talking about. So one benefit after the next. And I still think that we're just still at such a beginning stage of how do we create a natural landscape, a shoreline buffer zone, an infiltration basin, and a retention basin. How do we do this? How do we establish it with long-lived native vegetation? And how do we educate homeowners and homeowners associations to get on board with this when you always have a few of those people that feel as though a natural landscape is a weed patch. So it's more or less just introducing it and educating and being involved and directly seeing the benefits of it. So I think it would be best for me moving forward here is maybe I brought up some questions that some of you may have. So I'm gonna end it right there. I'll end it on the one aspect of restoration, as I mentioned before, is management. So even if these natural landscapes are 10 years old, let's say you have a native landscape 10 years old. Can you just let it go? No, you can't. But there are simple ways to take care of it where it doesn't get complicated by mimicking natural fire and natural grazing. And I'll leave it at that and we can jump into some questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Keir.
Sure.
Um, there we go. I don't see any questions coming through just yet on the Q&A or chat function. Feel free to submit any questions that you have with either of those formats. Additionally, if you'd prefer to speak your question out loud, you can use the raise hand function, and I can open up allow your ability for your microphone to work. So if anyone has any questions for either Katie or Keir at this time, please get them submitted or use the raise hand function. Looks like Maureen sent a question in. Is there a good source to find companies that do long-term native planting or stormwater system maintenance? Any sort of list or organization website either of you can recommend?
Well, I think, the native seed suppliers are a good start. Always try and find a seed supplier that's as close to you as possible for Wisconsin local genotype or wherever you are. That to me is really, really important. And companies, Prairie Moon, Prairie Nursery, Agricol, they all have incredible information on their websites, and they also supply plants and seed. And what I'll say about that is I'm a big fan of seed. Native seed has come a long way. Back in the old days, we used to harvest it in roadside ditches. we couldn't just buy it from Agricole or Prairie Nursery. We would have to harvest it ourselves. So, I would just recommend, the native seed has come so far. So go start with them and then maybe they'll have referrals for somebody in your area.
I would absolutely agree with that. We often send people to those websites have so much information. I believe the Wisconsin DNR has a list of native plant nurseries around the state. I'm not sure if that's been updated super recently, but when we were first starting out, we definitely referred to that. As far as maintenance and kind of the landscaping aspect, for most of our projects, the shoreline property owner has said that they would do it, and we kind of walk them through how at the beginning, just because they are such smaller restorations. The larger restoration things that we do tend to be with municipalities, so kind of their parks department, their land and conservation department take that on. But you could also just ask your local landscaper if they have worked on something like this before. We do have a couple people who they just their local landscaper just takes care of primarily removing invasive species, pointing those out, things like that. So kind of the general landscaping. So there is that list of native plant suppliers, I believe, on the Wisconsin DNR website. I'll see if I can pull up a link to that. But asking your local landscaper too could help.
Great. For people who are on the fence about these practices, what are the common selling points that kind of tip them to installing a native planting or shoreline?
Hmm. I kind of mentioned that before, and it's again, it's one person's prairie is another person's weed patch. And if it's managed properly, I don't think we would ever gotten into that scenario. I think there were, and still are, some naturalized growing spaces that may give natural landscaping or a naturalized growing space a bad name mainly because of improper management. So there's got to be that happy medium, like mowing it in the winter time, after the pollinator species are hibernating and whatnot, instead of burning it the next spring where you're waiting for the stars to align with the permits and the weather and the volunteers. You can mow it in the wintertime, which is going to closely mimic natural fire. It'll set back invasive woody species. It'll thatch up the biomass. It'll promote species diversity. So when you go into the next growing season, you're not looking at all the dormant foliage from the previous growing season. And that to me has given natural landscaping a really bad rap. And I agree. I mean, I wouldn't want my front yard I don't want you looking at all the dormant stuff from the previous growing season because then it looks like it's unmanaged. So to me, I think that would probably solve the problem almost immediately if you can keep these naturalized growing spaces somewhat behaved by mimicking natural grazing, so like when purple coneflower gets done blooming and it's instead of looking at the black seed heads, you can either, you can harvest the seeds, but you can cut it back, and not hurt the plant. And then the visual part of it is changing. Then you're focused on the next plant that's going to bloom. So things of that nature. So I guess, doing some research and checking out, looking at native landscapes and different types of landscapes. Again, the suppliers have great examples of all these. They have separate seed mixes for all these different growing spaces, from shoregrass prairie, which would be on the upland side, to a sedge meadow seed mix, which would be in a wetland side. So, you could start there, and once you learn one plant, it's gonna lead to the next, and I think that it'll slowly grow on you.
I would definitely agree with that. For our private property owners that are installing some of these smaller practices, going through us and the Fox-Wolf and the Healthy Lakes and Rivers reimbursement program, huge selling point. that they'll know that they'll get the technical help to install and then also that reimbursement. But sometimes they're still on the fence, and especially for the shoreline plantings, we talk about how geese actually don't really like to come up on land where there's shoreline plantings. Geese leave behind a lot of fun droppings, and they kind of get freaked out by taller plants just because they think that there could be predators, and it's also just harder to get into than that turf grass. So that one, if somebody is really on the fence and leaning, that can often kind of send them over. I do have to remind people they're not a complete deterrent. Geese can fly, but just makes it a little less appetizing to come up right there. And then the other thing is even for non-shoreline ones, for native plantings, is again starting small. I would echo, one plant, and then they see kind of the maintenance with that, how pretty it is, how much it's drawing in pollinators, and it just kind of expands from there.
I want to touch on the geese part of it. It's funny. My neighbor, who I don't think he's watching right now, but he's the president of my HOA, and he's got 4 acres of turf right up to the foundation of his house. And of course, I moved in next to him, and I'm a naturalist. So and now my prairie, I leave a nice little buffer between us, so my prairie's not overhanging on his or anything. But his property is loaded with geese right now. And I think the biggest thing is the food source. Turf grass is just perfect goose habitat. So shrinking these lawns a little bit, probably not a bad idea. I think, and I'm hoping that I can convince him. It's in full bloom, and it has been since the spring, and it has been a lot of fun. He looks at it, I think, as an area where rodents are multiplying. And I assured him, I said, well, that's good, right? Because then they're all over at my house, not at yours. So, those kinds of things. And, it's just kind of reprogramming our minds a little bit. Turf doesn't have to be right up to the water's edge or the foundation of your house. It's okay. And we just got to keep doing good work out there and create these beautiful habitats. And I think it'll just keep catching on.
Kier, we had a question asking any suggestions for incorporating a porous pathway on a steep hill. What types of stone might you suggest?
Ooh, porous pathway on a steep hill. Well, the impervious or pervious, the brick, on a steep slope, though, that might be a little bit trickier. Almost natural paths, like if you just mow a path, I guess if there needs to be enough sunlight there too on a steep slope. A steep slope can be shady. I would say open sunlight, have a switchback of a natural path. Is probably one of the best you could have. It depends on how much traffic you have and such, but that's a tough question. It's really site specific.
Going kind of in line with our talk of our geese friends, sandhill cranes apparently really
Yeah.
like native plant plugs. So do you either of you have any suggestions on how to prevent local wildlife from pulling newly planted plugs out of the ground?
You could go with seed. Seed to me, diverse seed mixes when the site is prepped properly. I love seed mixes. We put in plugs. We know that they bloom quicker that way. They don't necessarily establish quicker because those roots take a while for them to root into the ground. But using diverse mixes allows those seedlings to mature as a seedling, and it just, and then through management, it is going to be naturalize and become what Mother Nature wants it to become. You give her all the tools necessary for it to turn from, a disturbed area to a perennial garden or a perennial landscape. So I would just recommend overseeding anything that you put in plugs. You got to remember what's going to come up in between all those plugs. Do you want weeds to come up between the plugs, or do you want black-eyed Susan or another biennial or, eventually perennials, little blue stem or whatever. So I would recommend complementing plug plantings with seed and for the ultimate natural landscape where weeds don't stand a chance.
For some of our smaller plantings, people do just install temporary fencing, particularly in our more wooded areas where deer pressure can be a problem. But I can imagine it would. We haven't had specifically crane complaints yet, but if they're kind of small enough, the point is to making it less appetizing than anywhere else. So putting up that fencing might help.
Well, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in just yet, but thank you both so much for speaking today and providing your insight and experience. For anyone who does have additional questions, I'll be following up with an email to everyone registered today, again with a link to this recording, and that will also include the email addresses of both of our panelists today. So they have both told me that they are more than happy to answer questions if you want to send them an email if you think of something later on. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you with our other presentations happening tomorrow and Thursday this week. And thank you again so much, Keir and Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you.